Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and in today's video let's have a look at intersection takeoffs and everything you need to know about them. First of all, we're going to check out why you would want to do an intersection takeoff at all, and then we're going to have a look at a couple of practical examples of how to find the information you need, and finally of how to go ahead and plan your takeoffs. So we're sitting here in the Phoenix A320, and you can see I've already taken out a first chart over here. Now this one being Frankfurt in Germany, which is a prime example of intersection takeoffs being conducted. Now, first of all, let's talk about a couple of basic considerations for and against using intersections for your takeoff. Now, the first thing we need to consider is obviously the primary reason for doing an intersection takeoff, and that is reducing your taxi time. Now, reducing taxi time not only means that you spend less time to actually taxi to the runway, but also that you might be able to sneak in between a couple of other aircraft. So a prime example for this over here is Frankfurt runway 25 center, where ATC expects you to be able to take any intersection up to Lima 6. Now, whether ATC expects you to be able to use an intersection or not is going to be listed in the airport brief. So for that, you just go to the airport chart, general charts, and then you find your departure briefings over here. You read through the airport briefing, and somewhere in there it is going to say that you are expected to be able to use a certain intersection for your departure. Now, be aware that on the example of Frankfurt, for example, aircraft might be lining up via Lima 1, Lima 3, Lima 4, and Lima 6, and any of them is going to be in front of you if you insist on taking the full length for your departure. So, when considering the reduction of taxi time, don't only consider that you might have to cover less distance, but also consider that other aircraft might be ahead of you. We will have a prime example of where that can become very important a little bit later on in this video. The next point is obviously how much runway do I still have available? So, as you can see, Frankfurt's runway 25 center got 4,000 meters of runway available. With that, not a problem to take the intersection for your takeoff at all. Even at Lima 6, you will still have more runway than you'll have on many other airports. How much exactly? We'll check out in a moment. Now, primary reasons against using intersection takeoffs would be that any runway that's behind you is not going to be useful in case of a rejected takeoff, and the shorter runway you have available, the higher thrust you need for your departure, with the direct result that you will be able to use less flex temperature and therefore increase the temperatures in your engines on takeoff, thereby decreasing engine life and increasing maintenance cost. So it all comes down to ultimately figuring out what works best. Airlines will have policies for that, and if they don't, then usually you are still expected to use the intersection. Normally, the amount of fuel saved is going to make up for the maintenance costs created by using slightly higher takeoff thrust settings due to less runway available. Now, where can I find then which intersections are even available for our takeoff? Now, in most countries, that is actually published in the AIP, and if it is, then Jeppesen will have those little markings on the chart. For example, over here you see that Lima 6 marking, which tells you that Lima 6 is an approved intersection for your takeoff. Likewise, in the opposite direction, if we have a look at 07 center, you can see that you've got Lima 20, Lima 17, Lima 16, and Lima 14. Now, there is also a chart available where this information is given, and you can find that on the airport info and takeoff minimums chart. Note that on some smaller airports, as we will see later, that may be combined with the airport. However, in our case, if we have a look at the takeoff minimum and airport info chart, you can find that information up here. For example, on runway 07 center, from position Lima 14, you have 2,412 meters of runway available. So that stuff is located on the charts over here. Now, in order to understand a couple of examples which may not at first seem intuitive, but where an intersection takeoff still makes sense, let's have a look at another airport. And this time we are going to have a look at Cologne Bonn, likewise in Germany. So over here, if we have a look at the airport chart, and considering that runway 14 is in use, let's check this one out. So over here, let's say we're parking up here on the Delta apron. Now, when considering runway 14 left for our departure, the obvious choice would be to take intersection Alpha 7. However, even though the taxi time is further to Alpha 5, it might still make sense to plan Alpha 5 as an intersection. Now, why is that? Well, wide-body aircraft can typically not use Alpha 5, but have to depart from Alpha 7. And for that reason, from Alpha 7 you might have a wide-body standing there that is going to block you, but you may be able to taxi around and go for Alpha 5 for your departure. For air traffic control, it might often make sense to take you out first if you're sitting in a light or medium aircraft, because they have to apply less separation with the wide body departing behind you. So even though the taxi distance is further, it can still make sense to use that intersection for your takeoff. Now, if we have a look at the available intersections on the airport info chart again, then we are going to see that there is several different intersections available. So having a look at 14 left over here, from the runway head, we've got 3,815 meters. From Alpha 5, 3,587. But then we've got two more intersections which are approved for takeoff. That's Alpha 4 and Alpha 3, with 2,743 and 2,121 meters respectively. Now, this is where pilot judgment comes in to decide whether an intersection makes sense or not. Obviously, when you're parking up here at the passenger terminal, then it may not make too much sense to plan intersection Alpha 4 or even Alpha 3, especially when Alpha 3 is almost halfway down the runway, even though they are officially approved for departure. So in this case, if I'm standing here on the passenger terminal, I would plan Alpha 5 for the departure, but not Alpha 4 or Alpha 3, because that would result in getting too high assumed temperatures or flex temperatures, and thereby increasing engine wear too much for too little benefit. In 5 years where I've been based at this airport, we never used Alpha 4 or Alpha 3 for our departures. On the opposite side, then things are getting a little bit easier. If 3 to right is the main departure runway, you've obviously got Alpha, Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. And over here, we usually did plan Alpha 2 in our 737. However, for a wide-body airplane, you wouldn't plan Alpha 2, you would go for Alpha 1 or the full length. Now, let's have a look at another example of an airport, which is going to be Paderborn-Lippstadt, but in this case we will see that intersections don't always make sense. So over here we've got Paderborn Airport, and you can see this one features a nice runway 06 and runway 24. Let's say runway 06 is the active departure runway. Now, in order to shorten your taxi time, you could obviously just take intersection Charlie over here. If we have a look at the chart, and this is an example of a chart that gives you takeoff run available combined on the airport chart and doesn't give it separately because, well, the airport chart is rather small. Now, over here, even though intersection Charlie would be approved for takeoffs, with 1,610 meters departure runway available, with 2,180 meters in total, I would probably prefer to take the full length no matter what, even if I have to wait a little bit. Now, I can't give you any fixed numbers over here when an intersection would make sense and when it wouldn't make sense. That really comes down to pilot's discretion and to the pilot's knowledge of an airplane and to the pilot deciding on whether it's useful, whether it makes sense, or whether you would take the additional safety margin of having that runway in front of you. Now, with all of that discussed, let's go back to Frankfurt, and we are going to have a look at an example calculation that we might do when we want to depart on an intersection. So, today we're in Frankfurt and runway 18 is the active departure runway, with 07 being the main landing runways. There are a couple of considerations for us to do over here. Now, we are parking all the way up here on the Terminal 2 and somewhere on the Charlie gates over here. And when we get our startup clearance, per the local procedure in Frankfurt, ATC is going to ask us if we are able for departure from intersection Sierra. Now, here's our consideration. Intersection Sierra is located down here, so quite far down the runway. Let's have a quick look into the airport minimum and info chart to see how much runway we've got available. So runway 18, position Sierra, is 2,755 meters of runway available from a total of 4,000 meters that our entire runway has. So you can see that's over a kilometer down the runway. And on the first look, intersection Sierra doesn't necessarily make sense for us. However, here's my consideration on this one. So, ATC asks you if you're able for intersection Sierra because they want you to taxi southbound here on Uniform, and basically take the south transition, then eventually go up on Romeo, Sierra, and then all the way to the intersection. That takes you around the entire apron up here. So any traffic that's taxiing to runway 07 center for their departure, and any arriving traffic that comes in over here via November, is going to be out of your way. So even though the taxi route is quite a bit longer than the shortest you'd have up here, you will avoid lots of other aircraft, thereby making your departure probably a bit more expeditious. The next consideration we want to take is that up here on the full length you'll have all the wide-body aircraft. So if you're sitting in an A320 or a 737 and you can just sneak in via Sierra, it's probably going to achieve quite some savings in terms of your taxi time, as air traffic control can simply put you in between two wide-body aircraft, and it doesn't have to put you all the way at the end. Obviously, at any point you have the right to refuse the intersection, but you'll probably have to wait behind everybody else. Now there is one more consideration over here. Let's say we were not able for Sierra. Let's just say for whatever reason we are too heavy or whatever. Then there is also intersection Mike up here. Now that one might seem a little bit odd at first. However, think of it like that. We just said we've got 1,000 meters of runway, almost 1,200 meters over here. Let's say we have an aircraft at the full length that is going for a short ferry flight. So you'll have an airplane that has a huge amount of power available, and an airplane that will need very little takeoff run. Now let's assume that aircraft is going to start its takeoff run, take off somewhere over here, and then cross airborne on the extended center line of 07 right. Now, that airplane might either collide with an approaching airplane, or it might at the very least, leave some wake turbulences there, which could become quite critical for the landing airplane. For that reason, if you can taxi forward to intersection Mike and start your takeoff run from there, it's only about a couple hundred meters here. You will not be airborne there, so air traffic control can make you depart independently of approaches to 07 right. Whereas if you're at the full length, you will not be given takeoff clearance if approaching aircraft to 7 right are within a certain distance of the landing runway. So all of that now considered, even though on the first glance, taxiing all the way around the airport from up here, all the way over here down southbound, might not make too much sense when you know the local regulations and when you just think about the airport and its configuration. All of a sudden it might make a lot of sense to take intersection Sierra down here. Now for our case, let's just go ahead and presume that we are going to take intersection Sierra. Now how are we going to calculate this? Well, you are not allowed to depart from an intersection unless you have previously calculated that in your takeoff calculations. So how would we go for that then? Well, we've entered Frankfurt and we are going for runway 18, and let's just say it is a wet surface because hey, why not, huh? So we'll leave everything on optimum over here. Our takeoff weight, let's say, is going to be 66 tons, and our takeoff CG, let's make it easy, is going to be 25.0. Now, from here on, weather conditions, we can simply synchronize, and that's it. So now, we go and hit calculate, and this is going to calculate a full-length takeoff for us. So, as you can see, there is no intersection listed over here, and this gives us a takeoff performance limit, which is important for our general calculations because we want to know what is the maximum weight that we can lift out of this airport. Now, even though intersections might make a lot of sense, if you would have to leave passengers behind or load less fuel than you want for taking an intersection, that is a big no-go. So obviously, we first calculate for a full length in order to figure out our limiting weight. Now when that is done, we hit the View Intersection Data button. Now you can see we've got a lot of different intersections available over here, basically the same that we just had on the chart. As I mentioned, we want to take intersection Sierra today, so let's go ahead and select that, and that is going to give us our takeoff data. So here we go, 61 degrees flex temperature with those speeds. Now, what it also gives you is a takeoff shift. This one now is important for Airbus guys only. In the Boeing, we never entered stuff like that. So, Airbus. You need to enter that takeoff shift down here on the takeoff page. So, shift 1,200 meters. This is basically the position down the runway from which you're going to take off. Now, why is this relevant? Basically, when the thrust levers are put to the toga position and the airplane starts accelerating down the runway, then your IRS position is going to get updated unless GPS data is available. So if you're running on GPS, everything's fine. If you're not, then your IRS position would be updated when you start the takeoff run, and that might potentially cause quite an offset position once you're airborne. For that reason, it is important to insert the takeoff shift when you plan to conduct an intersection takeoff. So, I do hope that you found this one interesting, and I do hope that I didn't make it too long, that I kept everything understandable. Do let me know in the comments below. And finally, if you did like the video, be sure to leave a like on YouTube as well, as it does really help out the channel, and remember to subscribe if you're up for more. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and if you really like what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.